Welcome to Learning Photography with Duck. Here's your host, Duck.
Good Monday evening, everybody. Thank you and welcome to another edition of Learn Photography with Duck. As always, I am your host, Duck, and today is the Lightroom edition. And what we're going to be doing is talking about some new things that Lightroom has rolled out into the latest upgrade of Lightroom and Lightroom Classic and all that good stuff. Obviously, we kind of deal just with Lightroom Classic here, but everything, of course, that you learn with me here in Lightroom Classic, you can also apply to the Lightroom, regular Lightroom and Lightroom on the web. Okay, before we start that, let me just go into really quickly. Coming up towards the end of the month on June 28th, which is a Friday, the CTPPA hosting Josh Hanna and Nathan Locker for a dynamic seniors experience. They're going to be going through their entire workflow of shooting senior portraits. And
somebody has their microphone on. I think it's Bob.
Yeah,
People in the background.
Bob, if you can. Yeah, I muted him. All right. Sorry about that, Bill. All right. So they're going to be going over their workflow for senior portraits. But if you're interested in portraiture of any kind, it doesn't matter, if it's seniors or if it's family or if it's pets. There's something that can be learned with their whole workshop. It's a full day workshop, so you're gonna have to commit some time to it. But they go through their entire workflow, everything from how to light the for the portraits, how to shoot, how to edit, and they're also going to be going into the business of senior portraits. How to market yourself, and things like that. So, like I said, you don't have to be necessarily a senior portrait photographer. If you're any kind of family photographer, pet photographer, a baby photographer, okay? Or if you are thinking of possibly earning a little bit of cash with your camera, and want to break into something that, is, has a demand for it. This might be something worth checking out. So it's on June 28th. Like I said, it's a Friday. It's registration opens at 8:30. 9 o'clock we start. It's going to be at Illicit in Manchester, Illicit Brewing in Manchester. Everything's going to be right on the premises, so you don't have to go anywhere. We're going to have lunch there as well. Anyway, go to ctppa.com for registration, or just look for one of my links that I've posted, pretty much all over on Facebook. So, okay. Also coming up on the 22nd, which is a Saturday, I'm going to be doing my multiplicity photo shoot. I have it scheduled for Saturday the 22nd, but there's also a rain date for the 23rd. So if for some reason we get rained out on Saturday, we're just going to, hold off and do it on Sunday the 23rd. And it's at 10 o'clock in the morning, so we'll get in before the noonday sun. And for those of you who've never been to one of the multiplicity photo shoots, what it is what you do is you describe a little scene where you populate the scene with different characters, but you play all the roles. So what happens is you're going to be working with a team, groups of two with a teammate, and your teammate will be using your camera. So in the end, you get your photos on your camera to take home. There's no need for swapping, media cards or anything like that. It's also nice because you get to try out, somebody else's gear and become familiar with it. But basically, what it is you act out a scene in front of your camera, interacting with versions of yourself that is going to be photoshopped into the scene in post processing. So basically, you come up with an idea, you pre-plan it, pre-visualize it, and then on the day you have to rely on your partner. You share your idea, what it is that you're trying to accomplish, and then they kind of guide you where to stand within the frame, so that in the end you come back with a bunch of different photos of the same scene with you in different positions that you composite together in Photoshop in order to create a unified scene. In the past, it's been a lot of fun. Alan was with us last year. We had a good time. As a matter of fact, I'm using last year's photo for this year's marketing. So if you see me doing the fishing thing, that's from last year. Anyway, so that's on the 22nd, rain date to 23rd. And then on the 24th, we'll be doing a additional Zoom session on how to Photoshop composite your different images into a cohesive scene. So anyway, hopefully you'll join us for that. Let your camera buddies know. If you belong to a camera group, this is a great opportunity to get together and have a good time. The more the merrier. So invite all your friends out, anybody who's got a camera. Okay. All right. And I think that's it for that. All right. Excuse me 1 second. Let me go ahead and start the share. Let me share screen. Screen share. All right. Okay, so what's new in Lightroom? Okay. As you are aware, the biggest thing the past year or so with a lot of creative companies have been generative AI, whether it's generating images or like Chat GPT, where it's generating text. And even though it's quote unquote labeled AI, it really isn't artificial intelligence. There's no intelligence behind it. It's just clever mimicry and using certain algorithms. In the world of Photoshop and Lightroom, they started implementing AI into some of their tools several years ago with, the smart tools. So smart selections, being able to, generate masks a little bit more effectively using, these smart tools have really helped make Lightroom make Lightroom and Photoshop a lot easier to use. Now, obviously, they've been dedicating a lot of this technology into Photoshop because Photoshop has a lot more, a lot more tools, but a lot more application in the editing world than Lightroom. And I think what they've been doing is they were developing for Photoshop. And of course, because Photoshop has Adobe Camera Raw, and Adobe Camera Raw is pretty much the same engine as Adobe Lightroom. As they develop it in Photoshop, they find a way of, they refine it and they find a way of applying it into Adobe Camera Raw and in Lightroom. And one of the things that they rolled out earlier in the year with Photoshop was, this generative AI where you can designate, different areas within your scene, and you can say, hey, I want to insert a dog here, and it'll use Adobe Firefly, which is the Adobe's generative AI, and it'll create a semblance of a dog. Some results vary, and of course there's the whole ethics of it as to where they are culling the information for this AI. There's been a lot of arguments to that, but whether you're, whatever side of the fence you're on in regards to generative AI, unfortunately, it is here to stay. It's not going anywhere anytime soon. Now, the latest iteration of Adobe Lightroom Classic has introduced AI Replace. Well, no, I'm sorry. It's supposed to be AI Remove. All right, but as I'll show you in a second, there are some issues. All right, so the two biggest things that we're going to be talking about today is AI Remove, which is just an extension of the remove tool that we've used in the past, the object selection and remove tool, and of course there's the cousin, the clone stamp tool. All right, which if you've used it, you know that it can be hit or miss. All right, the other tool that we're going to be discussing today is a lens blur effect, and I think that particular tool is pretty impressive and what they have done. They rolled it out in beta a few months ago, and now it's come out as far as being integrated into the latest version. So without further ado, let me go into the develop module, and what you're going to see is that in the toolbar on, we're in the develop module, in the toolbar on the upper right hand corner, you'll see the standard tools that have always been there. Your crop tool, your spot removal, your red eye reduction, and of course your local adjustments, which is your masking. Okay, that's all there. But if you look under the remove tool, you're going to see that the panel has changed a little bit, and you have your smart remove, you have your regular spot healing, and then of course you have your clone. Okay, now the first one, which is the eraser, that's the one that's been kind of upgraded to an AI remove. All right, now and you'll notice that it has it's over there, early access button. Okay, it was in beta, it's now in early access, and eventually they're gonna, obviously work out the kinks, because you'll see that it's got its kinks, and then eventually it'll become a full-blown feature. Okay, so what does this do? Well, supposedly it's supposed to use artificial intelligence to analyze what it is that you're looking to remove. Obviously, you have to make a selection. It's going to analyze it, and then it's going to make it blend in with your image. Now, if you've used any of this with Photoshop, there are some limitations. One, anytime you use AI Firefly, all right, that's the engine that's behind this, it's going to charge you. All right. What do you mean it's going to charge me? Do I got to pay extra? Yes and no. Currently, you get a certain amount of credits a month. All right. And I believe it's 200, 250 credits, something like that. If you are a subscriber to the photography package, I think it's like 200 or 250 credits. I can't remember exactly, but it's a lot. And it's on a per month. Okay. So that means at the end of the month, it's going to reset the counter back to the original number. There are no rollovers. So if you say, well, I didn't use all of my credits, it's not going to roll those over. It's basically a standard, counter. It starts counting down anytime you use the tool. And if you run out of it before the end of the month, it doesn't necessarily charge you. All right. It's not like all of a sudden you're going to start getting a bill. All right. But what happens is it puts you on the bottom of the queue, because the way these work is you do need to be connected to the internet, because this is all done on Adobe's machines. They're not done on your local machine. All right. It sends the information up to the cloud, up to Adobe. Adobe's massive computing power takes your image, analyzes it, tries to figure out what it is that you're trying to do, and then returns back the 3 iterations, suggestions for a fix. All right. And I'll show you here. All right. So here we have, this was from the grand opening. Well, not grand opening, the season opening of Booth Memorial Park a couple weekends ago. And there was this gentleman here who was making balloon animals for the little kitties. And if we look here, there's this boy waiting for his balloon, and he's got his brother behind him with this balloon literally sticking out of his head. Okay. So you say, well, that's kind of awkward. Let me go ahead and remove it. Now, if we were to use the regular spot healing brush, okay, what we do is we just kind of like paint over it. All right. Make sure that you give yourself a little bit of extra room around it. All right. And once you paint over it, you can take that and you can maneuver that until it's kind of sort of gone. All right. And then, of course, if we zoom in, come on, zoom in. There we go. Oh. You can see that, it removed it, but it left a lot of artifacts, okay? We can see that it left a little bit of the balloon, and it really messed up his cheek over here, all right? So it's not the best tool, and until recently, this was the best that we had available with Lightroom. We can... That looks very phallic. We can kind of sort of see if we can maneuver our mask, to make it a little bit more effective. And sometimes we might even need to clean up a little bit more, but it's not a very good solution. Okay. So let me delete that. And of course, we can try with the clone stamp tool, which uses absolutely no kind of masking or no kind of artificial intelligence whatsoever. It's basically just saying, hey, I'm going to take a certain part of the image and I'm going to replace it, with that area. All right. And let me Get out of there. You can see that does a really terrible job because just like the other one, we have artifacting, all right? Whereas the other tool makes an attempt to kind of sort of blend the patch with the surroundings. The clone stamp makes no effort on trying to blend. So we get these really crazy halo effects. Okay. So that's the biggest issue. All right, let me go back here. All right, that's the biggest issue with those tools. All right, obviously it works really, really well if the object that you're trying to remove is isolated and it's not interacting with anything that's adjacent to it. Okay, so what about the regular remove tool? Okay, well, we can take the regular remove tool. Let me make my brush a little larger. Okay, and we're going to do the same thing, make a selection. All right, always add a little bit of extra so it knows where to sample from. Okay, and it's going to make a determination, and you can see that it does a fairly decent job where it's isolated, but where it's adjacent to something else, it fails at being able to determine what is what. Okay, so this is what, wrong button. This is what Adobe is trying to fix. They're trying to figure out, all right, how can we make these selections a little bit better. All right. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the generate AI. Okay. You can click on the object aware. What object aware does is it's going to try to use its database of knowledge and try to identify what the subject is. And it does a pretty good job. All right. So we have those two selected. Again, we're going to come in and I'm going to make my selection basically right along here. Again, I'm going to give myself a little bit of breathing room so it knows that it's got to sample from the area around it. Okay. And then you can see it made a selection. Okay. And if we look at the panel, the panel has changed. All right. You have the ability at this point to add to the mask. Or if you say, oops, I added something a little bit I shouldn't have, you can subtract it. Okay. And of course, you can increase or decrease the size of your mask as well, or your tool, the masking tool. All right. But that looks pretty good to me. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. Again, it's going to go up to the cloud. So you need an active internet connection. And now you can see, all right, let me take this off. You can see that where it was isolated, where, Lightroom never had a problem before with the other tools. This area is still the same. It does a really, really great job at removing it. But in particular, what I want you to pay attention is the area it was having problems with previously. Look at that. The kid's face is there. The hairline is there. The grass to remove the balloon goes all the way up to those two subjects. There is absolutely zero of the balloon left. Okay, so this right here is a game changer for any kind of object removal. Okay,
when it works.
When it works. Obviously, you've
I've
been
done
playing
that.
with
I've
it.
done that same type of thing, and I've
Yeah.
had to do it a couple of times in order to get that result.
Yep.
Hey,
Uh,
Doug,
yes.
this is why I prefer to do something like this in Photoshop. And I know I'm making more work for myself and I'm adding layers. Prefer to do something where I make a layer, I do something. If I don't like what I did, I just delete the layer.
Yes. Yes.
Because now I
But
have, no, because let me ask a question.
yeah.
If I do what you did, and if I didn't like it, oh, it's Lightroom. Oh, never mind. I know what I can do. I can go back to the menuing on the left-hand side and click the previous thing and okay, got it.
Correct.
I can click the go to the left side, please. History. Go to history. If you click history, what I would do in a case like that is go to history.
Yeah.
If I didn't like what I did, I would just hide. I would just go back to one of the earlier things, which gets rid of.
Correct. Correct. Well, in this case, yeah. I've rarely use history. To each their own. But if you don't like it, you could always go in and delete it. All right. But the one
Well,
thing you're
how
gonna,
do you mean? Oh, I see. So if I didn't like it, I could go back in and
yeah,
click delete instead of the add key. Okay.
right. So
Mhm.
if I'm like, oh, it did a terrible job. I don't need to bother going back into the history. I just go here. I can either hit the refine button and see if it can attempt to make a better solution, or I might just go in and usually I go in and delete it, and I'll try manipulating my mask so my mask is a little bit better. All right. But what
What
I want
happens
you
if
to notice that is right here, uh, when you have the mask selected that you made the AI, you get three variations. All right. Now in Photoshop, you're going to see three little thumbnails. Okay. When you use this tool with Photoshop, you're going to see three different thumbnails, and you just select which thumbnail you want to use. Here it doesn't have thumbnails. What we have is the left and right arrow, and then a one of three here. And then if we hit the arrow, it's just going to go through the three different iterations. And you can say, okay, well, look at that one. The face is kind of messed up. All right. So you say, well, I'm not using that one. All right. So then you can say, well, it's either version 2 or version 1. In my opinion, version 1 nailed it right out of the gate. So I can go ahead and use that. Okay. All right. It is a little process intensive when you're using these tools. All
one
right.
more question, Doug? What happens if you click early access? You get an earlier version of it?
No, it just says this is an early access feature. We're still working on it,
Okay.
and a link to their website with an article explaining, what's in the pipelines.
In other words, this is beta, right?
No, it's one step beyond beta.
I never heard of that.
Yeah, it's like we think we got most of the bugs out of it, but we're not sure. It's a soft rollout. I guess you can best describe it. All right. So in this particular image, you can see that uh, the object remove worked really really well. All right, and of course uh, at the full resolution, you can't even see it at all. All right. You have to look really, really hard to see if there's anything that was even done with. Okay. All right. So that's removing a balloon. All right. Uh, so this image, also taken from the same day, has this guy in a trumpet. And I loved the photo, except for the fact that right behind the trumpet player or whatever instrument this is, there's a guy here, all right, standing right there, right at the focal point of my image. Okay, right at the focal point. And, at the time I said, yeah, hopefully, using a shallow depth of field, I'll blur him out, whatever, blah, 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 blah. Right. And it's not like, yeah, I couldn't move very much. I was limited as to how far I can move. And it is what it is. All right. So I said, all right, well, let's try removing this guy. Okay. So we're going to go here. We're going to use our AI remove. Okay. And again, I'm just going to kind of go around this guy, fill them all in. Okay. Give it a second. It's going to analyze it. All right. And I'm going to go ahead and hit apply. It's going to send it up to the cloud. It's got to do its little process thingamajig. And wait a minute. What the heck? This tool is racist. It got rid of the black guy and put in a white guy. All right. That's not what I want. I want to remove the guy. All right. I don't want to swap him out for another guy. All right. What the heck? All right. So here is a good example of how the tool can fail. All right. It's supposed to be an object remove, but instead it replaced it with a similar object. It, like Alan said, it can be hit or miss depending on what it is that you're trying to do. Okay. So unfortunately, what happens? It's unusable and I lost a credit. Okay. So what do we got to do? Well, we got to revert, like Bill said, revert to our tried and true tools that we know how to use and just open it up in Photoshop and use some of the tools there. Okay. So it does have a little bit of work. Will it eventually do what it's got to do? I think so. All right. But they just need to fine tune the tool and make sure that it's always on object or subject remove rather than interpreting what should be there and replacing it with the same.
I would love to know, I know this is not part of the class, but I would love to know if anybody's going to come up with any set of ethics for two things. A, photography competition, and B, photojournalism.
Well, photojournalism, the tried and true ethics still apply. If it does not exist, you cannot add it. If it does not exist, you cannot edit it into existence. So
The North Haven Camera Club is wrestling, the board is wrestling with the idea of generative AI. And the one thing that somebody said, well, maybe it has to come down to, well, it's okay if it's your, this is just an idea that it's not formalized yet. It's not voted on. Somebody on the board did say, well, maybe it has to come down to, it has to be the maker's work.
yeah. So every camera club, every photography organization is going to be wrestling with the ethics of artificial intelligence.
Yes.
Even in the commercial world, there is a lot of discussion about the ethics of using generated imagery within, a commercial setting. And if you watch very closely, commercials on television, it's already starting to show up. I'm starting to see AI generated videos in commercial spots. It's here. It's here to stay. All right. Where it comes to competitions, this is not a new or unique argument. It's pretty much a rehash of an old argument that a lot of camera clubs have been faced with in regards to compositing. Okay. When Photoshop became readily available and people started seeing what could be done with photo compositing, it just opened up a whole new world of image making, to the point where you can have a floating ship in the sky, with swans flying by it, as a child is in a rocking bassinet floating on a clear blue pond. Okay. Is it photography? Well, it's photorealistic. There are photographic elements involved, but there's nothing that would say this is a photograph, because it's a scene that does not exist in reality. It is all based on the creator's mind. So obviously you cannot put it into a category that relies on any kind of realism. All right. But you can have categories that expand on the creative aspect of a visual artist, all right, who just happens to be using a camera as part of their tools for creating visual imagery. All right. And this is where that battle occurs between the photographic purists and the avant-garde artists, who just want to push and what they can accomplish with the tools that they have at hand. All right.
I'll say heck yeah to that one.
Do what?
I'll say heck yeah to that one.
Being able
that's
to
what
push
I do.
boundaries.
That's what I do.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. In my opinion, these tools, it's just another way of being able to express your visual ideas in a material format. Previously, if you wanted to create that flying boat over the still calm waters with a baby floating in a bassinet, you had to source all those different elements from somewhere. Either you photographed it yourself, or you went to a photographic library where somebody else photographed them, and then using the tools of compositing, you took all these separate elements and created something new from it. Okay. Where artificial intelligence is coming into play is now, instead of sourcing, doing all this research into where we can source a particular image, we can dictate to the computer, I need a ship, a full square rigger, galleon, wooden ship, blah, blah, blah. Describe it the way you want. And it's going to create some facsimile of what's in your head. Okay. Does it succeed? Well, not all the time. Okay. Where where it gets into the, as they say, the sticky wickets is when somebody is trying to create an entire scene all in one go, have the computer spit it out, and then they claim that, hey, this is my creative baby. All right. No, it's not.
That's happening with green screen as well.
Oh yeah.
The green,
Oh, yeah.
you know, I mean, the same type of thing. Uh, just a pic replacing a green background with something, you know, with action type
Yep.
thing behind it or in front of it rather.
Absolutely. So what's happening now is the argument that a lot of camera clubs are having is they say, okay, well, first of all, do we allow it? Well, in my opinion, you can't deny it. The technology is here. It's going to be used. People are going to want to use it. So what you have to do is you have to now create a category specifically for their use. All right. But because we are a camera centric club, we have to limit, what percentage of this artificial influence are we going to allow and still be able to call it a photograph or a composite or whatever. Okay. Obviously, something that's 100% generated by a computer, there's no photography involved whatsoever there. Okay. As a matter of fact, I wouldn't even consider it art. It's just bleh, spat back out at you, it takes absolutely no effort, no creativity whatsoever. Oh, well, I was creative in the choice of the words that I used to make the description. Yeah, well, my 3-year-old can do it too. All right, big deal. You know, probably do a better job at it because they have better imaginations. All right, but the thing is, this is what the camera clubs are struggling with. Is like, where do we draw the line? Okay, how many categories do we need to create in order to appease everyone? Okay, because remember, not only do they have to appease the old fuddy-duddy diehards, pundits, they also have to appeal the younger generation who's embracing this technology and coming up with new ways of using it. And probably ways of using it that we don't know about yet.
And that's the membership. And that comes down to membership.
What I
Yeah.
wish would happen, because camera clubs are judged by other camera club members elsewhere. I wish somebody like an NECCC or a PSA would come up with a set of rule guidelines that they
You got
recommend, and everybody do that, so that when those of us in North Haven judge in someplace else, we're doing this set of rules, and
Yeah.
when they judge us, they're also doing the same set of
Yes.
rules.
Yes.
Just like the PSA nature type
Yeah.
of thing.
You do need that uniformity across the board, and that's on them to come up with this uniform rules and regulations. Okay, and if they haven't yet, it's up to the members to press them for it. I'm sure it's not easy. If I were on one of those councils, I'd be hard pressed to to work on it, because there's going to be a lot of arguing, guaranteed. If you ever go in, behind the closed doors to these conversations, I can guarantee there are going to be numerous arguments over this. All right. But they have to go through that process. They have to do it. They can't put it off because it's requested, it's demanded by the membership. And they need to do it soon, because people are not going to want to, people like entering their images in competition. All right. And with this new technology, I'm sure a lot of people are wanting to introduce this new technology into the next set of images that they create for competition. So these clubs need to get off their ass if they haven't yet and say, okay, these are the regulations. All right. And people have to understand that this is all new. All right. So some of those regulations may morph and change, drop out as new ones come into play. And you have to have a certain flexibility. You can't say, well, what happened? You had this rule yesterday and now all of a sudden you're changing it today. You can't. You have to be flexible as people encounter these new situations. You may have to have a couple of competitions under the belt before people realize, oh, wow, here's a concept that, when we were hammering out these regulations, we never thought about this. And now it's starting to appear all over the place in these competitions. We need to address it. Okay. It's just part of the process, so, it's going to be a domino effect. All right. So if you are a non-officer member, you have to put pressure on the officers of your local group, who in turn need to put the pressure on the officers in the regional, and they in turn need to put pressure on the national organizers. But if there's no pain, there's no solution. So you gotta put the thumb screws on these people. You know what I mean? All right. Okay. Any questions on this AI remove tool? All right. Like I said, it's going to be hit or miss. Okay. The second tool that they introduced is actually works pretty well. Here, let me get out of here. Zoom back out. Okay. Come on. There we go. All right. And this is the blur tool. Oh, wait a minute. Where are we? Blur. Lens blur. Here it is. Okay. The lens blur tool. All right. This is another one that was in beta for a bit. And when I was playing around with it a little bit in beta, it actually did a really decent job. And then of course now they have it. They made it available in Photoshop first, and then now it is available in Lightroom. So if you're familiar with this tool in Photoshop, it works the same exact way. All right, so what does it do? Well, it does exactly what the name implies. It creates a lens blurring effect. Okay. And why I like this particular tool is because we've all struggled with that depth of field with our images. All right. Especially, images like this, where the closer you are to your subject, that shallower that depth of field is. Sometimes it just doesn't work. So you need to open up your lens a little bit more. Or if you are working with a kit lens that doesn't have, the flexibility that for example, a prime lens or a pro lens has. Okay. Obviously, we all know that in order to get those really creamy, background blur, we need some distance. All right. We need distance between our subject and our background. And sometimes that just isn't available. Okay. Or if we do get a little bit of blur like this one here, we want a little more oomph to it. Okay, so how does it work? Well, again, it works with the Adobe AI. All right, you open up the lens blur, and you're going to see uh, a little checkbox here that says apply. Okay, and that's pretty much all you do to start this thing is you hit apply, and it's going to go through the the image analysis using the AI what you call it the AI algorithm to determine, okay, what is this image of, what is the subject supposed to be, and what is the background supposed to be. All right, now it's not as simple as having, as you're looking. All right, it's not like having a subject and then a background. Okay, there are also things in the foreground as well. So you can have foreground, subject, background, and steps in between. Because if you've ever shot anything, like for example, a landscape, between you and that furthest point back, there are several elements at different distances between you and the background. So it has to kind of sort of determine these in an artificial way, because all it's doing is it's using the pixels that are in your image, using content aware to determine what it is it's looking at, and then creating what's called a depth map from that image. Okay, so what is a depth map? A depth map is, in essence, a grayscale uh, um, image that uses bright colors to show areas that are closer to the camera that's supposed to be in focus, and shades of gray. All right, and the darker it gets, the more out of focus something's supposed to be. Okay, so what it does is it designates areas according to a depth map and say, okay, well, like for example, this flower, that's our main subject. We're going to select that and paint that white. That means everything in there is supposed to be at whatever sharpness it is now. And then it uses the AI. All right. And if we look here, we're going to see what's called a focus range. And then just below that, the visualize depth. Visualize depth. All right. So if we click on visualize depth, we see that it creates what's called a heat map. All right. Now the original depth maps were black and white. In this case, what they decided to do is they went with contrasting colors, which I think it's an awesome solution to visualizing your depth map, where the brighter yellow represent things that are supposed to be in sharp focus, while anything that goes back into the magentas, all right, is kind of like that mid-ground. As it goes into the purples, it's into the backgrounds, and as it goes into the really dark purple, almost black, that's really pushed to the back. All right, so this allows us to kind of visualize where something is close to us and where something is, further apart, further back. Okay. All right, and like some of the other new tools that are being introduced, all right, if we go to our focus range, if we hover over it, you're going to see that there is a selection box that allows us to put more things in focus and less things in focus. All right, so if we look at the background, okay, we are definitely represented here. This is our subject. Okay. while this back here, this represents our background. Okay. All right. So once you understand that, and you can see there's really nothing here. Okay. But if we take this and we start pushing it to start including some of this, all right, you'll see how that's starting to now become brighter. What it's telling Lightroom is like, don't add any blur to these areas. Okay. So whatever blur is caught by your camera natively, that's where it's going to stay. Okay. So it's not going to sharpen anything. It's not going to make something that's blurry sharp. Okay, because that's not what this tool does. This tool just adds more blur. If something has blur, it's going to add more blur. If something does not have blur, it's going to add blur. All right, so hopefully that made sense. Okay, so here we can say, okay, well, how tight to the subject do we want to create this blur separation? Okay, because again, we're working in this particular case with a new tool that's available to us in post-processing that was normally only available in camera. All right. And if you recall, there were workarounds for it, in post-processing by artificially creating, Gaussian blur, but that's a different story. But if you recall, there are three things that we're always editing. We're always editing texture, which this falls under texture, okay? Color and luminosity, okay? So with texture, we were fairly limited as to what we can do. Most of the time, what we could do is add sharpness to an image to create that micro texture, make something pop forward. Now we have the ability to add blur substantially, all right, to create a softened texture in order to create that contrast between something that's sharp and something that's blurry. Okay. All right. So we're going to take the visualize depth off. Okay. And, this, like I said, creates how close to our subject we want to get. Okay. But if we go back to the top, we have these little icons. All right. These icons represent the type of bokeh that is available to create artificially. And what you're going to find is that most of the time, you're not going to see any kind of difference with these selections. All right. Where you're going to notice it the most is in any specular highlights. All right. Those tiny points of light that are visible, predominantly like in night scenes with any artificial points of light, water scenes where you have the specularity bouncing off the tops of waves, all right, things like that. That's where it becomes a little bit more prevalent. If you have a sharp eye, you may be able to figure out what kind of bokeh you're applying in something that doesn't have as much specularity. But an image like this, I can make these different changes, all right? And you're not going to see any shape difference to the bokeh because there's just not any of that information available, okay? So most of the times you're just going to leave that at the default, okay? And the amount of blur is controlled by the top slider, okay? The boost is for the bokeh, all right? It will boost the visibility of the bokeh. All right. Like I said, not visible here, so I really can't show it with this particular image. All right. But what I can do is I can boost that amount up to 100%. All right. And you can see now how that subject just pops forward. Okay. And it does let me see if I can zoom in here. It does a fantastic job at understanding what the subject is and what the subject isn't. Okay. Look at that. Look at that. All right. All right. So let me reduce it down to 0. Okay. That's what it was originally right there. Okay. Takes a second for it to catch up. And then that's at 100%. Okay. All right. Now, in this particular image, it did a fairly decent job of figuring out what was what. Okay. If for some reason you say, oh, you know what? There's a part here that I wish it would include in the mask. All right. So if we click on the visualize depth again, okay, you're going to notice that obviously we have the flower, okay, and we have the stem of the flower here, right? But there's also this leaf right here that included it because the leaf literally sits right adjacent to my flower. All right. So it sees it as being part of that subject, and rightly so, because it's in the same focal plane. But you want to say, this allows you to use your artistic brain, and you can say, you know what? I don't want as much attention to that particular leaf. I want to blur that leaf out a little bit. Okay. Or in this case, I want to exclude it from my mask. Okay. So this is where we can refine our mask. We have the brush refinement, and we have two buttons, focus and blur. Okay. So just think of it as kind of like an add and subtract. Okay. By clicking on blur, all right, we now have a brush mask, and we have the ability to, the amount of masking we're going to apply with the brush, the size of our brush, all right. Hopefully y'all can see that really, the size moves up and down. Okay. The feather edge. Okay. And of course the flow, how much is applied in any one given time. All right. So just like any other brushes, you can also control it with the square bracket left, square bracket right, to make it bigger or smaller. All right. Now, so what I'm going to do is I have my blur selected, okay, and I have it at the amount 100% or 200% in this case, and my flow at 200 or 100 rather. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in here, all right, and you're going to notice that it's painting in the heat map. All right. So obviously at this percentage here, it's pushing it all the way to the same value as if it was the furthest point back. Okay. So you might want to say, you know what, let me undo that. Okay. Visualize depth, blur, and maybe the amount, all right, is going to go at, let's say 80%. All right. And now, good. here we can see that it's not that dark purple. Okay. All right. And if you make a mistake, just hit focus. All right. And you can clean up these edges a little bit. Okay. Or you also have the ability to do an auto mask. All right. Let's see. One thing that I'm hoping that they would do with some of the other mask painting tools, you can use a toggle between a plus and a minus. All right. They don't have that here yet. I'm crossing fingers that this is something that's coming down the pipeline, because it'd be nice to be able to just switch between the two rather than futzing around with this, reset and coming in and redoing things because you messed up. Okay. All right. One thing I do suggest is you can always, add more. All right. So you just make a pass. All right. Keep it at a low amount. And if you need to, you can always add an additional pass down the line. Okay. So what I did is I just kind of hit that whole entire leaf there. Okay. Take my visualize depth off. And now if I toggle between visible and not visible, all right, that's before the lens blur. This is with the lens blur. There you go. Takes a second to catch up. So you can see that leaf that was adjacent to my stem, that was also, pretty, not sharp, but pretty much in focus, is now pushed out of focus a little bit more. Okay. So you can manipulate the depth mask to a certain extent. All right. All right. Let's take a look at something that's a little bit more complex. All right. This was also from, I'm starting to glitch out. All right. Like I said, these tools are a little bit on the process heavy side. Hopefully, as they progress, they'll get a little bit better and not be as process heavy. Okay. But anyway, so we're going to do and click apply. Apply initiates the AI tool to do a diagnostic on the image, kind of figure out what is what. Okay. Now, the default is it kind of applies a 50% blur. Okay. Right out of the gate without you even doing anything. All right. And like anything else, our eyes tend to adjust really, really quickly. So here it is, we're working on the image. We click on the apply. Normally what I do is as soon as I hit the apply and it's doing its little thing, I'll either look somewhere else, grab a drink, whatever it is, and then come back to the image. And I look at the image and I go, all right, what did it do? All right. Because there's already natural blur going on from my lens initially. All right. So I either have to toggle that blur effect on and off, or what I found better, right, because I like to see exactly what is happening, I'll immediately turn on my visualize depth map. Okay. And now I can see exactly what the computer thinks is what. All right. And if we look, Oh, come on. Here we go. Right down here. It selected the hand, but it missed the sleeve. All right. And let's see if we toggle that off, toggle that on. All right. It did a good job with the shirt. Okay. Definitely missed the sleeve. All right. So what I'm going to do is, in this case, we know that this should actually be part of what is in focus. All right. So it mistakenly said we're going to blur it. Okay. So we're going to go ahead and come in and we're going to tell Lightroom that no, I want this in focus. So we're going to click the focus. All right. We have our amount. We have our, all right. And we're going to go ahead and just paint that in. Okay. Oops. Oh, stop. My thing got stuck there for a second. All right. Brush. All right. And I'm using the auto mask, so it does a fairly decent job. Okay. We can turn the auto mask off. We can, clean up whatever edges. Usually that won't make a difference. All right. A little bit of the bag here that it missed. All right. And just like any other, a little bit of the bagpipe up here that it missed. Okay. So just like any masking tool, we can work our way around, make sure that it did a good job at selecting everything. All right. I think it did a good job. All right. The tent canopies, it's in that mid-range. All right. You can nitpick. Okay. But in my opinion, I don't think that's going to be that bad of a deal, simply because in the original, it's already fairly blurred out. So what I'm doing here is blurring even more. Okay. But if I want to, I can limit my mask a little bit more if need be. Okay. All right. How much? All right. Take the visualize depth off. All right. And I can now play around with the slider. Okay. So I can push it to 100% and then dial it back to a point where I think it looks good. I think about 60% looks good. And voila. Now my Piper stands out from the background. The background is still discernible as to what is there. It's some kind of festival without it being completely distracting. Okay? So you can see how this can be a big benefit, even if your image already has that nice background blur already attached to it. All right. Because obviously there's going to be some kind of background blur to begin with. This just allows you to really emphasize that to the level that makes it, takes it from a snapshot to now to a very deliberate purposely created image. All right. And of course, in addition with your other edits, your color grading, color control, things like that, it's just that one more tool to add to the to your toolbox. Okay. So this one was fairly simple. It did a really, really good job of determining what was what. Okay. This next image, this one becomes a little bit harder because there are multiple items. It's going to analyze things a little bit differently. It's going to, you'll see, it's going to have a hard time figuring out what is a subject, what is not a subject, what should be in focus, what should be blurred, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Okay. All right. Again, by default, it applies a little bit of blur because we really can't tell what's what here. Okay. The first thing I do is visualize depth. And it says, oh, well, obviously, it thinks the items closest to the camera should be the things that are in focus. All right. And that is actually two buildings that frame my scene. All right. And that's not what I want in focus. All right. What I want in focus is actually what it is considering to be in, here we go. So what we can do is we can try to use our tools to kind of limit. There we go. All right. So hopefully you can see that you can manipulate this to kind of get as much as what you want in there. All right. Okay. We can, the boost doesn't do squat. We're not going to do anything with that. All right. So now we need to work. All right. Because if we look here, okay, it didn't do a very good job. We have this bush here, and for some reason it thinks the lower half of the bush should be more in focus than the upper half of the bush. Okay, so you can see how certain things kind of fail here. All right, the top part of the bell totally missed that. Let's see, let's drag this over. Okay, it did a fairly decent job with the that little windmill. However, the shadow, which I thought was kind of unusual here, the shadow thinks the shadow should be more blurry than the actual building itself. All right, so it failed there. And of course, the arms of the windmill are out, as well as the railing here and a little bit here is saying that it should be more out of focus. Okay, and then we go over here. Did a fairly decent job here. All right. Oh, completely missed the under part and the side of this stone bench. So again, this is the shadow, right? The underside of the bench, the shadow, completely missed it. So shadows, for some reason, seems to be a little complex. All right. So we're going to go about 50%. We're going to go focus. All right. Focus, meaning these areas that are purple in the heat map should be closer to yellow. Okay. All right. So I'm going to go ahead and bring that in. All right. And if I make another pass, that's about it. Good. Okay. Let's bring that up, strength a little bit more. All right. This part of the lighthouse, or the windmill rather, right? Same thing with this. Okay. The shadow area. All right. So you can see that there are going to be some cases where you're going to need to do a little bit of work on the on your mask. Okay. And I've said it before, your image is only as good as your mask. Okay. A little bit of the bell here. In this particular case, I don't want these windows and I don't want that bush. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the blur tool. All right. And I'm going to blur that out. Okay. For some reason, that part there doesn't want to take it out. That's strange. There we go. Take that out. Oh, underneath the eaves here, take that out. Okay. Maybe clean this up a little bit in here. All right. All right. A little bit up here, take that out. Okay. We can make the brush a little bit bigger and we can see, you know, maybe some of these trees here in the background. All right. There we go. For some reason, I don't know, that's that little spot right there. That's weird. Let's go to 100%. Oh, no, won't let me. All right. Okay, that's it. All right, let's try adding another blur. No, won't let me. Okay. All right, so obviously this tool has some work. It needs some work. Okay. Take the visualize depth off. Okay. And let's go. Oh, let's really push it. Oh, there we go. Okay. Some of the edges need a little bit of work. All right. We can go in here and clean it up. All right. We can actually do it visually here. Clean up these little edges and voila. We need this in focus here. This in focus. This in focus here. All right. Blur the background there. All right. And just like that, we've added some nice blur to give our before, after, okay? And if it's too much, we can always dial it down. All right. Okay, that's pretty much the two tools. The other thing that it added was when you make collections, smart collections, you can now create a smart collection on images that you have exported. All right. How useful is that tool for you? Well, it depends on your workflow. All right. If you need to keep track of all your exports, there you go. You know, so now you can have all your exports all in one place. If you want, you know, create them in categories, create them because it's a smart collection. You can say, okay, these are all my exports based on butterflies. These are all my exports based on landscapes. All right. So it may be of benefit. It added some tethering capabilities for Sony cameras. And what else did it do? And added support for a few more of the newer cameras that are coming out and the lenses that are coming out. Of course, you know, we have a lot of mirrorless cameras that are just rolling off the assembly line. It seems like every other month. Those are also being rolled into Lightroom as well. So just trying to keep up. Okay. And that's pretty much it for what's new with Lightroom, and obviously these two being the biggest ones. Any questions on this tool? Nothing?
I've used it a little bit, not to this extent though, but I can see where this photograph is very complicated to use
Yes.
that tool
Yeah.
on. Where
Can it still be
the prior,
done? Can it still be done? Absolutely.
yeah,
You know, you just have to play with it a little bit,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah. Um,
You know, where I think this particular tool shines the most is in two places, in my opinion. One is if there's a limit to your lens. All right. Like I said, you know, usually some of the kit lenses, they're not the greatest. Okay. So this can really enhance that kit lens look. All right. The second place is where you have two items on the same focal plane, but only one is your main focus, your main subject, the main visual object. All right. And you want to take that secondary element that's in line, that's also as sharp as your main subject. And you want to just kind of just soften it up a little bit visually. So that way your eye goes to the one that's in sharp focus first, and while dismissing the other one that just it just happens to be on the same focal plane. All right. Um, that allows you to really add that little out of focus blur without it looking fake. You know what I mean?
that's what that's the thing that concerns me about doing editing, even Gaussian blur. I'm always afraid of making it look phony.
Right.
And in some cases, I'll look at something and I'll go, no, I'll keep it the way it is.
Yeah. You are the ultimate arbiter of your art. You know, there are people that really, you know, will push colors, will push, you know, exposures, will push textures, and you know, it's personal preference. Salt and pepper to taste.
You know, Duck, when I look at this image, it reminds me of, I don't know if I'm using the right term, but they make these things called dioramas, and then some folks take pictures of them,
Oh,
you know, and
the tilt shift effect.
is that what they call that?
Yeah.
So-
Yeah, I don't. Uh, it doesn't quite do that. There is a tilt shift effect in Photoshop though. Um, the tilt shift effect is where you're actually manipulating the focal plane. All right. So let's see. You have your camera, all right, and from from the camera sensor, all right, which is in this case north-south orientation, your focus is going to go out to your subject, but it's going to be at the same angle as your camera. So if you tilt the camera, the angle of that focal plane is going to be the same. It's always going to mirror it. Okay? With a tilt shift, you can independently you can independently tilt the angle of your lens, so your focal plane angle is now different from the angle of your camera, the sensor. Okay? So what happens is where it intersects with your subject, there is a faster fall off front and back from that point of sharp focus. All right. And it gives it that uh, well, depending on what you're photographing, it gives it that miniaturization look. That works really, really good for like bird's eye view photography, looking down, because it really enhances that miniature look. So,
I guess that was the term, or what I saw, especially these rolling things and that windmill in the middle there. It
mm-hmm.
kind of gave that kind of illusion.
Yeah.
But Bill's right. It does. If you go too much with it, it doesn't look real. But
No, it doesn't. But this is an artistic choice. All right.
mm,
You may, obviously using it for a landscape, it looks off. It goes into that uncanny valley where it's like, it shouldn't be that out of focus. Okay. However, if you use it with a portrait where the subject is, a nice sharp focus and everything in the back is that, you really maximize the blur, then it becomes more acceptable because we're used to seeing that kind of blur with a portrait, whereas with a landscape, not so much. So I just, I wanted to show it with these images just to really illustrate what the tool can and can't do. So, all right. Any other questions? Hopefully you'll find some uses for these tools.
I will definitely find a use for the first one and a little bit of a use for the second one. The second one the lens blur, I would use for something like, not like this here, but I would use it for like a flower or for a person.
Mm-hmm.
I would use it for in that case. I'm not trying to be negative here. I'm just trying
No.
I'm just trying
Absolutely.
to think of um like I say, I'm always afraid of overdoing it. And
Right.
once I've published something and can't, well, I think most things you can take it back, but if I can't take it back, or somebody says, hey, why does that person have three arms? I mean, look what happened to
Yeah.
the Kate Middleton thing.
Right. But you do a lot of group photos on your
Yes.
hikes.
Mm-hmm.
You can very easily apply that lens blur
Yes,
to a
yeah,
group of people.
with the type of background I aim for. I aim for
Hmm.
something that's not busy, maybe like something that's all trees, all greenery behind
Right.
them. And
So here's obviously it's not a group photo like what you would take, but it's fairly similar. All right.
mhm.
Here's before.
See,
There's after.
do that again, please. I'm having trouble seeing on this.
That's
Oh, I
that's
see
be
now.
that's
Do that again.
before. All right. It
Yes.
takes a second, and then that's after.
Okay, there we are.
You
Okay,
know.
I see that.
So apply this to your group photos, and you're going to make that group really stand out from its background without
Mhm.
completely destroying what's behind them.
Okay.
You know. All right.
well, I've been Duck. I've been doing quite a bit of what you're saying with the flowers lately. And what I've been doing is be creating masking and then duplicating and inverting the mask. And it seems like a whole lot more capability, especially that setting the certain areas.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to that part of it.
Yeah, and like I said, it's still in its early release. I can see some problems, especially with the masking, that definitely needs improving upon. But as far as determining what should be and should not be in focus, it does a hell of a job. You know, I'm pretty impressed by the tool so far. You know, so and the thing is, uh, if you wanted to do something like this in Photoshop, what you needed to do is create a duplicate, isolate your subject, remove the subject from the underlying background plate, because if you add a Gaussian blur to something that has a subject in it, you're going to get that kind of like fuzzy halo.
Yes.
Right? So you need to remove the subject completely so that when you blur out your background, it doesn't create that weird halo. So right there, that's a multi-step process that takes a good 15 minutes to do. That's completely taken out of the equation now with this simple tool here, And like I said, if you don't need to go overly crazy with your background blur, this will do the job, So, and there's a little bit of leeway. And like I said, hopefully their masking will get better as the tool progresses, and hopefully we see changes to that sooner than later. So anyway, that's it. That's all I got for you guys today. There are a few new tools that came into Photoshop that we'll be covering next week. And then we'll take it from there. Okay. Any other
Great.
final questions before we let you go?
No questions.
No questions.
All righty. Once again, thank you very much for hanging out with me.
Oh,
I-
just one thing for those of you who are taking pictures of roses. They were in full bloom last week at Elizabeth Park, and my flower experts have told me that they bloomed early this year.
Yeah.
And in fact, somebody today was saying they're starting to wilt a little bit now. Walnut Hill Park in New Britain has roses. I wish I had known that. And of course, there's Elizabeth Park. I'm only 5 miles from Walnut Hill.
Right.
And you guys down there in Stratford, you have that park.
Yeah. Booth Memorial.
Yes.
That's the Rose Gardens. Yeah.
Mhm.
When I was there for the season opening, there were maybe like 4 roses total in the whole garden. And so I'm sure I haven't been back since, so I'm sure right now they're pretty much in full bloom.
Mhm.
So hopefully they'll be in good condition when we go there for the multiplicity shoot. So
All
all right, guys.
Good
As
night.
Thanks, Doug.
always, thank you very much. We'll see
Okay.
you next week.
Have a good one.
Thank you for watching Learning Photography with Duck. Brought to you in association with Milford Photo, your local full-service camera store. Located in downtown Milford, Connecticut, Milford Photo offers you a personalized shopping experience. From the latest camera gear to printing and framing services. And, of course, educational workshops to teach you the finer aspects of photography. Don't forget to tell them Duck sent you.